We're here in Weymouth, Massachusetts in early August of 2010 at a local chapter meeting, and we're going to be talking about the Federal Constitutional Convention. Now, we have some good news to report that local state senator from Weymouth, Bob Hedlund, has said that he would sponsor a resolution to rescind Massachusetts calls. It was interesting is that our calls go back to 1941. There are about 14 different calls. And it doesn't matter the purpose of the call. The Constitution, under Article 5, says that states will have applications to propose amendments, plural. And it doesn't say why, it's just that they have them. But of course, there's always a motivation behind something, whether it be a balanced budget amendment, a flag burning amendment, an amendment to outlaw abortion, an amendment to make it legal, I mean, to clarify it so there's no question. And all kinds of amendments. Some of them we might, the whole concept of the law we might like. For example, I'd be hard-pressed to vote against an amendment to outlaw abortion. But the process through a constitutional convention is very wrong. And just let me go over our Constitution. Under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, there are two ways to amend the document. The first way is the only way we've ever used. It's where 2/3 of the House and Senate, the U.S. House and Senate, pass the proposed amendments. Then it goes to the states. And with the states, you have to have 3/4 of the states to ratify to make it the law of the land. Now, we've got, what, 27 amendments in the 200-plus years we've been in existence, 230-plus years. And our founders wanted this done on purpose. They didn't want spur-of-the-moment type things. They wanted deliberation. They didn't want it to be an easy process. When you change the Constitution or alter it, it's something you take very serious. The second means is through what they call a constitutional convention, or what we call a Con Con for short. This is where Congress has nothing to do with the Con Con except to determine its means of ratification. But I can get into that too. 3/4 of the states will apply for a Con Con. Now, a state might put a reason. A state assembly might say for a balanced budget amendment. It might say to pray in school or to not pray, whatever. The purpose is irrelevant. It's the call that makes the impact. And there actually are some general calls. Rhode Island has a call going back to 1790 just for a general Con Con, without any particular reason. Now, when the 3/4 of the states have made their call, it's about, what, 34 states, then a Con Con is convened. Now, Congress is supposed to determine the means of ratification, and there's two ways to do it, either through the state assemblies or through a ratifying committee, where a predetermined group will determine whether or not anything coming out of this convention will be voted on. And although a Con Con is a sovereign body, now we've had one Con Con under the previous document called the Articles of Confederation. These folks convened, and they weren't supposed to give us a new document. They were supposed to amend the articles. But they determined, they said, folks, we can't amend this thing. We've got to make a new one. And we're kind of glad we got what we got. But can you imagine any such document even resembling this coming out of a group today?
Never.
And there's a lot of well-intentioned people that think we should have one. Some of them are sort of newly involved patriots. Some of them are people who've been involved a long time. There are people on both sides of the political spectrum that say, yeah, we need to have a Con Con, we need to do things differently, or what have you. And I tell people, especially folks that are involved in the Tea Party movement, some of them are being kind of convinced that it's the way to go. I'd say, okay, great, let's have a Con Con. Who's choosing the delegates? Have you thought about that? And most of them haven't.
No.
We got to throw the bums out. We got to do this. We got to. I'm all in favor of throwing the bad people out, the advocates of big government, at the ballot box. Not through a convention, not through an amendment, not through term limits, at the ballot box, the way our founders intended. So I tell people, you live in Massachusetts, you want to have a federal convention because you think Congress is out of control. You're right, they're out of control. So what do? Who's going to appoint the delegates to this convention? Are you going to appoint them? Is your group leader or the person leading this Tea Party group going to? Probably not. Who's going to? Well, if you live in Massachusetts, it's going to be maybe our governor, Duval Patrick. Right? Obama light is really what he is. He would be just as bad as Obama if he were president. And what about our assembly? And what about our great general court in Massachusetts? The same ones that passed the so-called gay marriage law? the same ones that are debating whether or not transvestites can go to men's rooms or ladies' rooms, and it's actually a debate. That's how bad things are. The same legislator that gave us Romney Care, and I think there was only 2 votes against it. These are the folks that are going to send delegates to this convention, and you trust them to do what's right? And what about if you live in Maine? Well, you get a similar situation in Maine, in whatever state you may live in. And you might have some delegates that would do what's right. I tell people, if I was in charge of sending the delegates from Massachusetts, I'd pick, I'd pick a few people and say, we're going to do 2 things, or maybe 3 things. Repeal the 16th Amendment, 17th Amendment, and go home. And that's that. But that's not what's going to happen here, unfortunately. The reason being, this is not something that's just reared its ugly head, just happened yesterday, last week, or 2 months ago. This is something going on for a long time. And in the mid to late 80s, there was a big drive to have a balanced budget amendment via a Con Con process. And we were 2 states away from a convention, 2 states away. And the John Birch Society played a key role in stopping this, in getting states to pull out. Some states had a call and they rescinded their call after finding out who's behind it. There was a couple of organizations back then. One of them was called Project 87. Another group was called the Committee on the Constitutional System. And then there was groups like the Taxpayers Union, headed by John Dale Davidson. Probably many fine people in the organization, and no doubt they probably have do some good, but this was a bad thing, a bad idea. Well, our members got wind of this, and we went to state legislators. We were saying to our members, don't write a letter, don't make a phone call. This was before internet was so big, or YouTube and these other means of communication. Go to that person's house, knock on the door, and demand hearings on this. And a number of states started pulling out. So we had a little safety margin. There was one book that we used as a way to convince people. It was written by, and I wish I had a copy with me, it was written by James McGregor Burns. It's easy to remember because in the book he talked about the igniting crises. So he was a professor from Williams College here in Massachusetts. He said that our founders were too smart for us. He said, we have to make right what they put asunder. And he explained having checks and balances and limited power was the problem. Oh. And we need to have a crisis, an igniting crisis, to justify a federal convention to change the Constitution. And what these various groups and people have advocated is some type of parliamentary system, like they have in Europe. Isn't it interesting that many of our ancestors came away from Europe to get away from that stuff? They come over and say, we want to do it just like they do it. You see? Yeah. No, we're unique, we're different, and our government should be different. And by the way, there's nothing obsolete about this Constitution. Nothing obsolete about it. Although we have computers, and we have rockets that go to the moon, and we have all kinds of technology, human nature doesn't change a whole lot. And it really deals with human nature more than it does inventions. People tell us, oh, that was in the horse and buggy days. Well, so what? Yeah. You know, what has that got to do with it? Human nature is the same. And so, in fact, because we're so advanced technologically, it would be a reason for less government. Right. Because we don't need to have as much government because there's fewer needs. Most of the stuff can be done locally. Yeah. So it's an argument really against technological advances would be an argument against more government. So back in the 80s to late 80s, we were able to keep this Con Con away. But we discovered something. We discovered that there are calls that go back years, and these calls never die. There's no sunset clause on a call. So some states have dozens of calls. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Rhode Island, they adopted the Constitution. They were the last of the original 13, and they immediately called for Con Con. James Madison, who was known as the father of the Constitution, said something like this: I shudder at the thought of another convention. The fact, there was a lot of like-minded people together, but there was regional differences, and they fought, and they yelled at each other, and they got something quite good, we thought, about the U.S. Constitution. But even then, he thought another one would be dreadful. It would seal the doom of the Constitution. So that's why he said, bar the door against the convention. That was the sentiment. Not bar the door against amendments, but against the convention. So we discovered that numerous states have calls. And some of them, like I said, were around back to 1790. Massachusetts has 14 calls, at least 14. There might be a few more that I missed. And so our goal now isn't just to stop a new one. we have to stop all of them, repeal all of them. And we've introduced a model resolution in different states, basically calling for to repeal all of the calls. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Bob Headland in Massachusetts, here in Weymouth, has agreed to sponsor, and we need to have co-sponsors. And something interesting happened. It was back in middle of July. One of our members was visiting the office, and they were watching the proceedings in the Senate. And something else is happening that we need to stop too. It's a way. There are a number of states that are trying to pass laws that will say that our electoral votes will go to the winner of the general election, which to me is unconstitutional because the states can't determine who. The states may have a means of choosing the delegates, but not who the delegates vote for, you see. So they're violating the Constitution. But somebody, I guess it was Richard Say, who was running for lieutenant governor, got up and introduced 6 resolutions. And I think the strategy was just to delay the bill. It wasn't to that he was in favor of it. But among them was a call for a constitutional convention. Wow. Well, this young lady, that she called me up. Oh, gee, I can't believe it! And she was very active. We took a few trips to the State House in February and in April, trying to get legislators involved in this. She couldn't believe it. And I said, well, calm down. We've already got 14 calls. It doesn't matter. One more isn't going to make a big difference. You know, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. I said, but the good thing is, we will now have people talking about it. Now it's going to be controversial. We visit the state houses and call elected officials at the state level, and they don't even know anything about it. They don't even take it serious. Now they are. So he actually, Bob Headland, when he heard about this, he got back to the floor. He was armed with talking points, which we had drawn up. Talking points, like 14 or 15 little bullet points as to why it's a bad idea. And he formally challenged a senator from Dorchester, Massachusetts, which is in the neighborhood of Boston. I think his last name is Hart. He said, would you co-sponsor this with me? So now we have people talking about it, and that's what we need. I've been getting these emails every so often, and it says, the person who created the email probably doesn't know the whole story, because it said that we just need 35 governors to certify that their states have applications. He probably didn't know, whoever drew this up, he or she, didn't know there's already 22 states or 21 states that have applications. So I'm not sure what state you may be in if you're watching this on YouTube, but every state in New England has a live call. I'm sorry, except for New Hampshire, which just repealed theirs about back in May of 2010, a few months ago. And it was a great story in New Hampshire. It took 22 years. Every 2 years, our local members would submit a resolution. We would distribute, in those days there were videos, now there are DVDs and articles from a magazine, reprints, and it would get to a committee, and the committee would come out and say, inexpedient to legislate. It would go to a full vote, and it would be voted against all the time. So, but finally they pulled out, and Tennessee followed suit about 2 weeks after that. So our job here in Massachusetts and wherever else this may be, we may be viewing this, is to get, if your state has an application, to get it to repeal. We have model resolution. Give us a call. Contact us. jbs.org. Call me directly at 857-498-1309. I will get you a copy of this article from the New American Magazine, a copy of the resolution, and a half-hour DVD which you can watch, or you can actually go to YouTube. It's called Beware an Article 5 Convention. So with that, I want to thank you, and let's save our Constitution.